Hello everyone and welcome at Kabaza Web TV. I'm Hilaire Uringhuru. This February 22nd, 2018, the heads of state of the East African Community will meet in Kampala for the joint East African Community Heads of State retreat on infrastructure and health financing and development. Some Burundians were hoping to have the Burundi crisis on the agenda of this joint retreat, but it seems not to be the case. Kabaza Web TV wants to present to you some key facts pertaining to the East African Community Heads of State role in their attempt to solve the Burundi crisis. So here's our write-up. For those of you who don't know Burundi, the Republic of Burundi is a small, landlocked, yet a very, very beautiful country in the eastern part of Africa. The Republic of Burundi has been going through cycles of violence. Some of you may have heard about the ethnic conflict between Hutus and Tutsis in Burundi. Well, on August 28, 2000, representatives of the then government of Burundi, the National Assembly, and several political parties signed what is known until today as Arusha Peace and Reconciliation Agreement for Burundi to put end to the conflict. This agreement was signed in the town of Arusha in the United Republic of Tanzania. The Arusha Agreement has several provisions that all representatives resolved and committed to be bound by. Most Burundians agree that there was a relative peace and reconciliation among them from 2002 to 2015, when the current president of Burundi, His Excellency Pierre Nkurunziza, stood for another term. This sparked unrest in Burundi, and another cycle of violence was just starting. The main question some people are asking themselves today about the Burundi crisis is whether the East African Community Heads of State failed to solve the Burundi crisis or deepened it while they are witnesses and guarantors of the Arusha Agreement. Let us put things into perspective and go back to the conflicting ideas about the cause of the current unrest situation in Burundi. One group of Burundians alleged and alleges that when the current president of the Republic stood for another term, he violated the Constitution of the Republic of Burundi and the Arusha Agreement. And both the Arusha Agreement and the Constitution state that the president of Burundi shall be elected for a term of 5 years, renewable only once. No one may serve more than 2 presidential terms. End of quote. On the other hand, another group alleged and alleges that the Burundi Constitutional Court decided in favor of the current president and allowed him to run for another term. Whichever group one may support, the truth is several people fled the country due to the unrest. Some people died. Others were reported as kidnapped or detained illegally. This proves beyond doubt that the presidential term limit was and still is an issue in Burundi. Additionally, this proves that there is a crisis. No one can prove otherwise for a simple reason. If representatives of both groups were meeting for a dialogue with the intent to agree on some points and put an end to the crisis, then there was and there is a problem. They were not meeting in and out of Burundi for fun. Can we really say that the East African community failed or deepened the unrest situation in Burundi? First and foremost, we should mention that all the representatives of the parties involved in the Arusha Agreement back in 2000 signed the Arusha Agreement in the presence of Jean-Baptiste Bagaza and Sylvestre Ntibantunganya, former presidents of Burundi, the representatives of Burundi civil society and women's organizations and religious leaders, His Excellency Mr. Nelson Mandela, who was the facilitator, His Excellency General Gnassingbé Eyadema, who was the president of the Republic of Togo and the then chairman of the Organization of African Unity. There was also His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who was and is still the president of Republic of Uganda. There was also His Excellency Daniel Arap Moi, the president of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Benjamin William Mkapa, president of the Republic of the United Republic of Tanzania at the time, and also there was His Excellency Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. There was also His Excellency Laurent Désiré Kabila, president of the Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There was also His Excellency Mr. Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time. And there was also His Excellency Dr. Salim Ahmed Salim, the former Secretary General of the Organization of African Unity. There was also Honorable Charles Jocelyn, Minister of Minister of Cooperation of the French Republic, representing the European Union. And there was also His Excellency Dr. Boutros Boutros-Ghali, a former Secretary General of the International Organization of the Francophonie. And finally, there was Mr. Joseph Warioba Butiku, the executive director of the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation. And this is very important. So secondly, we should mention that Article 2nd of the Arusha Agreement states that in Section 1, the parties acknowledge the need for the agreement to be accompanied by and to be a condition for lasting peace and cessation of violence in Burundi. And Article 3 of the agreement, state that the agreement shall be signed by the parties, the facilitator, the President of the Republic of Uganda, as the chairman of the Regional Peace Initiative on Burundi, the President of the Republic of Kenya as the region's elder statesman, and the President of the United Republic of Tanzania as the host, and the representatives of the United Nations, the Organization of African Unity, the European Union, and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation shall also affix their signatures hereto as witnesses and as an expression of their moral support for the peace process. So here we are going to highlight two names: His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and Benjamin William Mkapa. His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was not only the president of Uganda at that time. Today he's still the president of Uganda, and he was at the time the chairman of the Regional Peace Initiative on Burundi. And now he's still the president of Uganda, as I said before, and he is the mediator in the Burundi crisis since 2015. As far as Benjamin William Mkapa is concerned, he was the president of the United Republic of Tanzania at the time the accord or the agreement was signed, and now he's the facilitator in the Burundi crisis since 2015. So remember, Article 3 of the Arusha Agreement expressly states, I'm going to quote the final part, they shall affix their signatures as witnesses and is expression of the moral support for the peace process. End of quote. And if we go further in Protocol 10 of the agreement in Article 10, this Article 10 states, quote, "The parties urge the heads of state of the countries of the region to continue to provide their support for the peace process in Burundi." That was Section 1. And now Section 2 of Article 10 states, "The heads of state of the region shall also constitute guarantors of the agreement." Well, in all these provisions and others, we hear about witnesses and guarantors. As witnesses, their role should have been to speak truly and seriously on what they know about the presidential term issue. As an expression of their moral support for the peace process, they should have sided with whichever group was right in the conflict and take such steps as are appropriate against a group that was wrong. Thus, had they testified the legitimacy or the legality of the presidential term and sided with the current Burundi government, for example, they wouldn't have called both groups for the dialogue. Instead, they stayed silent, as if they were not consignatories of the Arusha Agreement, and completely ignored their moral support role. As guarantors of the Arusha Agreement, the East African Community heads of state had to do all that was and is in their power to secure the Arusha Agreement. They had two options. If the actual government was at fault, they should have recognized the regime and should have imposed sanctions on Burundi and taken other measures that would have served this purpose. And on the other hand, if the opposition parties were at fault, the East African Community head of state would have collaborated with the international community to arrest and extradite members of the opposition for alleged crime or crimes, violence, and attempted coup on May 13, 2015. Again, Article 2 of the Arusha Agreement states, let me repeat again, I'm quoting, "The parties acknowledge the need for the agreement to be accompanied by and to be a condition for lasting peace and cessation of violence in Burundi. The guarantors of this agreement knew and know this. They know that everything that violates the Arusha Agreement will bring Burundi back to its old demons." If one asks all the heads of state of the East African Community this simple, direct question, is the president of Burundi, His Excellency Pierre Nkurunziza, now serving a legitimate term in accordance with the Arusha Agreement and the Burundi Constitution? Well, none of them would be willing to answer this question with a yes or no response. Instead, they will be diplomatic in their answers. So now listen to Jakaya Kikwete, former Tanzanian president, in 2015 when he visited his counterpart in Burundi, and it was exactly when the crisis started.
Kwamba uchaguzi unaongozwa na katiba, uchaguzi unaongozwa na sheria ya uchaguzi ya nchi hiyo. Kwa jambo kubwa, wote tuhakikishe kwamba, na kwa Burundi uchaguzi unaongozwa na makubaliano ya Arusha. Katiba ya Burundi, sheria ya uchaguzi na makubaliano ya Arusha ndio yaongoze uchaguzi wa Burundi. Sasa kama mtu anataka kugombea uongozi, lazima atambue kwamba azingatie katiba ya Burundi, sheria ya uchaguzi na makubaliano ya Arusha. Pale atakapokuwa yamekiukwa, vyombo vya kisheria vipo, mahakama zipo zitakazoamua kama huyu anayetaka kugombea anazo sifa kwa mujibu wa katiba, anazo sifa kwa mujibu wa sheria na anazo sifa kwa mujibu wa makubaliano yale ya Arusha. Tukishayaheshimu hayo, Burundi haiwezi kuwa na matatizo. Yeyote asiye kama yatatokea yoyote yale, ushauri wangu na nilisema pale, twende tukatumie vyombo vya sheria vitu. Ukienda kufanya kitu kingine chochote ni kuingiza nchi yenu kwenye matatizo ambayo mnaweza mkayaepuka.
For those of you who don't understand Swahili, he summarily says that the judiciary of Burundi should be the only institution to decide whether the president should run again or not, taking into consideration the constitution, the constitutional provisions, the electoral law provisions, and the Arusha agreement. On May 8th, 2015, the inner city press asked him the same question again. Now listen to his answer.
Burundi. I'm chairing the East African community. Yep. What I've done is to dispatch a mission of the foreign ministers of Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. They've been to Burundi on the 6th of May. They met the president, they met all the political actors. On the 13th, we're going to have a summit of the East African community to hear a report from the ministers. What they gathered there, what are the proposals, and then we'll discuss as the East African community on how to assist the people of Burundi have successful elections and peaceful elections as well.
What about the AU chair's pronouncements yesterday?
I'm talking about the East African community. Don't ask about the AU chair, okay?
What about a third? I mean, in the Security Council, one of the members, permanent members, has said that the getting into the constitution of Burundi is not appropriate. I'm not saying you would get into the constitution, but is the issue of the third term something that the East African community would talk about, discuss, and have some opinion on?
We have sent ministers. The ministers will report to us, and then we will discuss. Have patience. After the 13th, you'll get information of what we have decided. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Again, he failed to respond directly with a yes or no answer. He promised that a team of the East African Community Foreign Affairs ministers will visit Burundi and report their findings. Well, later, he rejected the report of those ministers of the East African Community after their consultation with those in conflicts in Burundi. In fact, the report of those foreign ministers clearly states that in the opinion of the East African Community Attorneys General, there is no legal constitutional basis for the elections to take place with President Nkurunziza Pierre participating as a candidate, because this would be violating the Constitution of Burundi and the Arusha Agreement. The foreign affairs ministers even proposed the East African Community heads of state two options toward the resolution of the conflict. The very first option was the preferred, the best case scenario, as they named it, and it was that the East African Community heads of state would convince the president of Burundi, His Excellency Pierre Nkurunziza, to withdraw from running for his office in the interest of the country and the region. The second option they provided was that elections would take place with the President Nkurunziza participating as a candidate. This was the less advised option. The East African Community convened the third emergency summit at the level of heads of state in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and that was on July 6, 2015. And this was to review the situation in Burundi under the chairmanship of His Excellency former President of Tanzania, Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete. And during this summit, it's reported that His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, former President of Tanzania, made it clear to the heads of state in the summit that he would not accept the first option, and Pierre Nkurunziza should run for the third term, since the Burundian Constitutional Court ruled in his favor. He also alleged that Burundi is a sovereign country. Well, he knew from the beginning that Burundi is a sovereign country. Why did he spend human and financial resources and time knowing in advance that he will not accept the report of foreign affairs ministers of the East African Community on the Burundi crisis? Well, the heads of state chose the second option, as we said already, the less advised, but their foreign affairs ministers suggested the first option as a preferred option, and they were against this first option. They were also against the report or the advice of the East African Community attorneys general. Since they chose the second option and the less recommended, the East African Community heads of state failed, and here's why. The summit took decisions, and most of them were completely ignored by the Burundian government. One of the decisions was that whoever wins the presidential elections in Burundi should form a government of national unity involving those who participated in elections and those who did not, and should, as necessary, provide seats for special interest groups. Well, how can you recognize the sovereignty of a country and decide what that country should do? It seems doesn't make sense. If they considered that the Constitutional Court of Burundi decided in favor of President Nkurunziza, they shouldn't ask him or whoever wins the elections to share power with others. Let's go to the next decision. the next decision was that whichever political party wins the presidential elections and all other political parties commit to uphold the Arusha Agreement or the Arusha Peace and Reconciliation Agreement and commit not to amend the constitution on Burundi in respect to the term limits and other fundamental principles enriched in the Arusha Agreement. Well, again, if Burundi is a sovereign country, if the Constitutional Court of Burundi decided in favor of President Nkurunziza, why the heads of state of the East African community would take such a decision which would interfere with the sovereignty of Burundi. So it doesn't make sense either. Another decision that was made was that the government of Burundi should disarm Imbonerakure, which is a youth league of the ruling party, and other armed youth groups allied to political parties. Well, this didn't happen, and until today, there are reports of youth from both parties, the ruling parties and opposition, being armed and using those guns. Now, let us go. Another decision was that the African Unity should urgently deploy military observers to oversee the disarmament process. Well, this also didn't happen. Now, neither His Excellency President Mkapa nor Kaguta Museveni, who signed the 2000 Arusha Agreement and who well know the truth about the legitimacy and the legality of the Burundi term limit issue, didn't say a word. Instead, the latter is acting as a mediator in the Burundi crisis and the former as the facilitator. Now, listen to what Kaguta Museveni said during the consultations sessions.
Extrajudicial killings, those ones cannot be tolerated. Sit down and quickly also, because you know the talks go on. What are you discussing? These are clear things. You can meet one afternoon and agree. What are you discussing here? To discuss whether Museveni is Museveni. You are not sure whether Museveni is Museveni. There is a problem in Burundi now. We cannot come in because Burundi is a sovereign country. Sovereignty only comes when you are protecting your wrongs. You are not sovereign against the Europeans who come and tell you to do this, to do that. You are sovereign against your own brothers. Don't bring conditionalities. We shall not participate because of this one. No. You got the substance. They may be criminals. But for the sake of peace, let's give them immunité provisoire.
Now it has been more than 2 years, and there is no agreement between parties in the conflict. He even promised to send independent investigators to verify allegations of extrajudicial killings in Burundi. But until today, he has not sent any investigator, while there are reports of extrajudicial killings, kidnappings, and illegal detentions. Now, listen to Benjamin William Mkapa.
And they all said this is a legitimate process which has come to a legitimate conclusion. So those who think I'm the one that is rendering legitimacy are absolutely out of their minds. Quote me, they are absolutely out of their minds. Ambassadors come here, they present credentials to President Nkurunziza. The Security Council resolutions recognize him as the president of this country. So what is this foolishness? We are spending a lot of time talking about an event that is all over. That is why the communique says we should emphasize on creating conditions that will make such confusion obsolete come 2020, that will produce conditions of an election in 2020 which will be free, fair, and credible. If there are any complaints, this is the time to get together and sort them out. That's all I'm saying.
Well, instead of testifying about what he knows about the issues, he just makes references. He just makes references to the People's Acts that legitimate the current president term. It's worth mentioning that there is a keynote speech by Benjamin Mkapa during the RPF in Hotanyi 30th anniversary international conference on Africa's liberation and transformation. And in this keynote, he expressly said, quote, "One must pay tribute to ECOWAS leaders. On the other hand, we have the Burundi crisis, which the East African community have committed to help solve. I am a facilitator of that commitment, but I must concede that in this instance, the spirit is deficient, a case of the spirit being willing and the flesh being weak." End of quote. This statement says it all. His spirit knows the truth. He is not ready to tell the truth and solve the crisis once for all. You know, we Africans, we always exalt our elders as custodians of wisdom, and we expect elders to display their wisdom through words and deeds. Here, these elders are remaining silent, or are silent and inactive before a most important issue. Now, to finalize this write-up, let us listen to what some African leaders said about the Burundi crisis. First, listen to His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, during the signing of Arusha Agreement.
President Nkurunziza should not run for a third time, because whatever the argument he uses, he has served 2 terms. And he shouldn't go for this third term, because apart from anything else, I don't think the Burundi can afford to undermine the Arusha Agreement, because that Arusha Agreement has been very, very critical to securing peace in Burundi for the last 10 years plus. The problem is that to have him for that extra 5 years raises serious questions about whether the Arusha Agreement is going to survive. And if it doesn't survive, then Burundi is back in civil war.
Well, this may be considered a prudential interpretation of the Burundi constitution on the term limit issue, for example. Second, what were thoughts of His Excellency Jacob Zuma, also former president of South Africa, about the Burundi term limit issue?
My view, which I've sent it to be expressed, is that it would be more appropriate and perhaps correct for him, even if he has won the constitutional provision or point in court, but for the sake of Burundi, it would be good if he withdrew as a candidate, so that Burundi cannot go to war again.
No comment. Note that His Excellency Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, during the Arusha Agreement, also tweeted about the term limit issue in Burundi. Finally, listen to His Excellency Robert Mugabe, former president of Zimbabwe, slamming African presidents who find excuses to cling to power, suggesting the example of the Burundian president.
But when we have served 2 terms, we have not done much. And 2 terms was like 2 weeks. So we want to go more. So you want another term, and you must find an excuse. The first term I served, oh no, it was not a real term. But you were there for 5 years. Oh no, it was Parliament which chose me. I should have been chosen by the people, so that one does not count. And the others say it counts.
Fair enough. Thank you for watching. If you want to check our next write-ups, follow us on Twitter at Kabaza Web TV or subscribe on our YouTube channel, Kabaza Web TV. Until next time, stay safe and be blessed.